My daughter booked our retirement cruise. At check-in, I realized I wasn't going. We had talked about this trip for months. She picked the ship. She picked the dates. She even told me what kind of shoes to bring. I packed slowly. I folded my clothes the way I always do, thinking about how strange it felt to be planning something just for myself after all those years of raising children. At the port, everything looked busy and loud, but the desk we stood at felt very quiet. The man asked for my name, then asked again. He looked at my daughter. She nodded slightly and said, "That's okay." I didn't understand what she meant by that. I thought maybe my room number was wrong. Maybe the computer froze. Maybe someone pressed the wrong key. But then the line behind us started moving, and my daughter stepped forward without me. That's when I realized this trip wasn't canceled. It was never meant for me. And the part that stayed with me the most wasn't standing there alone. It was understanding how calmly people can leave you behind when they've already made up their mind. I stood there with my suitcase sitting at my feet and my purse across my shoulder, watching my daughter disappear through the glass doors without looking back. Not even once. The sound of her rolling luggage got swallowed up by all the noise around me. Families were laughing. Couples were holding hands and taking selfies. People were starting their vacations, and I was just standing there like a statue, trying to make my brain catch up with what had just happened to me. The man behind the counter had already moved on to help the next person in line. An older couple, probably around my age, all excited about their anniversary trip. They were holding hands and grinning at each other like newlyweds. I picked up my suitcase and walked back toward the parking garage. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely get my key in the lock. The steering wheel was hot from sitting in the Florida sun all morning. I could smell the ocean coming through the crack in my window, all salty and thick, and it felt like it was mocking me. The drive home took about 40 minutes, maybe longer. I didn't cry. I didn't even feel angry yet, to be honest. I just felt numb, like my brain couldn't quite process what my daughter had actually done to me. I kept replaying all those months of conversations in my head. Every single phone call where she'd asked me if I'd gotten my passport renewed yet. Every text message with links to different shore excursions she thought we might enjoy. Every discussion about whether we should get the drink package or just pay as we went along. She had asked me what kind of books I wanted to bring to read by the pool. She had reminded me to pack sunscreen, the kind that wouldn't irritate my sensitive skin. She had sent me a whole packing list she'd found online, with little check marks next to things like comfortable walking shoes and a dressy outfit for the formal nights. Every single detail had been part of the lie. Not a small white lie to spare my feelings. Not a last-minute change of plans that couldn't be helped. This was a deliberate, carefully calculated deception that had gone on for months and months. When I pulled into my driveway, the house looked exactly the same as it had when I'd left it that morning. The porch light was still on, even though it was the middle of the afternoon now. I'd forgotten to turn it off in all my excitement. The newspaper was still sitting on the front step where the delivery guy had tossed it. The welcome mat was all crooked from where I'd rushed over it earlier with my suitcase, so eager and excited to start this big adventure I'd been looking forward to. I had been so incredibly happy this morning. I'd woken up at 5 o'clock, way too excited to sleep anymore. I'd triple-checked my suitcase to make sure I had everything. My medications in their little organizer, my reading glasses in their case, my phone charger, my favorite sweater in case the air conditioning on the ship was too cold. I looked at myself in the bathroom mirror and thought about how much my husband would have loved this trip. He had always wanted to go on a cruise. We'd talked about it for years and years, made all kinds of vague plans, but we'd never quite gotten around to actually booking one. And then suddenly he was gone, and it was too late. But then my daughter had given me that chance. Or at least, that's what I had believed with my whole heart. I brought my suitcase inside and just left it sitting by the front door. I couldn't bear to unpack it yet. The thought of putting all those clothes back in the closet, all those plans back in the drawer, it was too much. The house felt way too quiet, too empty in that heavy way it gets when you've been expecting to be gone for a while. I walked through the living room, past all the photographs sitting on the mantel. My wedding day with my husband looking so young and handsome. My daughter's baby pictures, her as a chubby toddler with curly hair. Her high school graduation where she'd been valedictorian. Her wedding day where she'd looked so beautiful in that dress I'd helped her pick out. All these moments of love and family, and now I didn't know what any of them actually meant anymore. I made myself a cup of tea, just going through the motions like a robot. I sat down at the kitchen table in the chair that always creaks. That's when I saw it sitting there. The envelope tucked underneath the sugar bowl where I'd be sure to find it. Plain white, nothing fancy. My name written across the front in my daughter's careful, neat handwriting. The handwriting I'd helped her practice when she was in first grade, making sure her letters were formed just right. My hands were steadier now as I picked it up and opened it. Maybe steadier than they should have been, looking back on it. The letter inside was 2 full pages long, front and back. She started out by saying she loved me. That's always how these things start, isn't it? Then she went on to explain that she thought this would be easier than having an actual face-to-face conversation with me. She said that she and her husband had been planning this cruise for over a year now, just the two of them, like a second honeymoon to reconnect. When I had mentioned a few months back how much I'd always wanted to go on a cruise someday, she'd panicked and just went along with it because she didn't know how to tell me no. She didn't know how to set that boundary with me. She wrote that I had become way too dependent on her since Dad died 5 years ago, that I called her too much, needed her too much, expected too much of her time and energy. She said she needed space to breathe, needed to establish some healthy boundaries, and this was her way of forcing that to happen. She hoped I would understand eventually. She said that when she got back from the trip, we could sit down together and have a real, honest conversation about what a healthy mother-daughter relationship should actually look like going forward. She signed it, "Love always Sarah," with a little heart drawn next to her name. The same little heart she'd been drawing since she was a teenager. I read that letter 3 times, each time sitting there at my kitchen table. Each time, I felt something a little bit different wash over me. The first time, confusion. The second time, deep hurt. The third time, something colder and clearer. Something almost like relief, in a strange way. I folded the letter back up carefully, put it back in the envelope, and set it down on the table in front of me. Then I just sat there for the longest time, drinking my tea that had gone lukewarm, looking out the window at the backyard, at the big oak tree my husband and I had planted together 30 years ago when we'd first bought this house with our life savings, at the flower garden where I'd spent so many peaceful hours over the years, pulling weeds and planting bulbs and watching things grow, at the bird feeder hanging from the tree branch that needed to be refilled because I'd forgotten to do it this morning in all the rush. I thought about the last 5 years, ever since my husband had died so suddenly. How completely lost I had been in those early days. How my daughter had been right there for me, helping me figure out all the bills and taxes and paperwork and all the practical things my husband had always handled because that was just how we divided things up. How grateful I had been for her help and support during that dark time. How I'd started calling her more and more often after that, asking her to come over when something in the house broke, when I couldn't figure out how the new TV remote worked, when I just felt so lonely I couldn't stand it anymore. Maybe I really had become too dependent on her over these past few years. Maybe I had called her too much, leaned on her too hard. But she was my daughter, my only child, the person I'd given birth to and raised and loved with everything in me. I thought that's what family did for each other. They helped each other out. They showed up when things got hard. They didn't plan out elaborate, months-long lies that ended with you standing all alone in a cruise terminal, realizing you'd been played for a complete fool. I didn't sleep much that night, tossing and turning in my bed. I kept thinking about the way she had nodded at that check-in desk, that small, simple gesture that told the man behind the counter it was okay. It was fine that my name wasn't on the reservation. How calm she had been about the whole thing. How practiced it all seemed. She had known exactly what was going to happen at that moment. She had probably rehearsed this whole scenario in her mind multiple times, playing it out. And she had decided that it was perfectly acceptable to humiliate me in public like that, rather than just sit down and have an honest, difficult conversation with me like an adult. By the time morning came around, I still hadn't cried a single tear. I got up, made myself some coffee, and did something I had never ever done before in my entire life. I opened up my laptop computer and searched for family lawyer near me on Google. I wasn't entirely sure what I needed a lawyer for yet, but something deep in my gut told me I needed to understand what my options were. I needed to know where I stood legally, financially, emotionally. I needed to protect myself. The first lawyer I called said she couldn't see me for 3 whole weeks. 2 booked up. The second one I tried had an opening that Friday, just a few days away. Her name was Margaret Chen, and I liked the sound of her voice on the phone. Professional but kind. Her office was in a small brick building downtown, up a narrow staircase that smelled like old carpet and lemon-scented cleaning solution. The wooden railing was a little bit loose under my hand as I climbed up, 1 step at a time. Margaret was younger than I had expected, probably in her mid-40s. She had short dark hair cut in a professional bob and glasses that kept sliding down her nose. She had a kind face, the sort of face that made you want to trust someone right away. Her office was small but comfortable, with walls lined with heavy law books and a window that overlooked the street below where people were going about their normal days. She offered me tea. I accepted, grateful for something to hold in my hands. We sat across from each other in her small office, and I told her absolutely everything. I told her about the cruise, about standing at that terminal. I told her about the letter my daughter had left for me. I told her about watching her just walk away without looking back. I told her about my husband dying 5 years ago and how hard that had been. I told her about all the money I had given my daughter over the years, all the ways I had tried so hard to be a good mother to her. Margaret listened to every word without interrupting me even once. She took careful notes on a yellow legal pad, her pen making soft scratching sounds against the paper. It was such a relief to just talk to someone who was really, truly listening. When I finally finished talking, she set down her pen and looked at me with those kind eyes behind her glasses. "Do you have a will?" She asked me directly. I nodded. My husband and I made one together. Oh, it must be about 15 years ago now. Everything goes to Sarah. The house, all the savings accounts, the retirement accounts, my life insurance, everything. She's my only child, so it all goes to her. Any other children at all? No, just Sarah, just her. Margaret leaned back in her chair, and it made a soft squeaking sound. And is that something you want to change now? I didn't answer right away. I sat there thinking about my daughter as a little girl. The way she used to make me breakfast in bed every Mother's Day, always burning the toast a little bit, but trying so incredibly hard to make it special for me. The way she would hold my hand when we crossed the street together, long after she was old enough to not need to anymore. The way she had sobbed at her father's funeral, how I had held her close and promised her that everything would be okay, that we would get through it together. I honestly don't know yet, I said slowly, carefully, but I want to understand what all my options are. I need to know that. Margaret nodded like she had heard this exact thing many times before from other people sitting in that same chair. She spent the next hour and a half explaining things to me in plain language I could actually understand. She talked about wills and trusts and power of attorney documents. She explained what would happen to all my assets if I didn't make any changes to my current will. She talked about how to protect myself if I ever got seriously sick, if I ever needed long-term care in a nursing home, if my daughter tried to take control of my affairs without my full consent and understanding. She didn't tell me what I should do. She wasn't pushy or judgmental at all. She just gave me clear, factual information, and I wrote down everything in a small notebook I had brought with me in my purse. Before I left her office that day, she said something that really stuck with me, that I kept turning over and over in my mind. You don't owe anyone automatic access to your resources just because they happen to be related to you by blood. Love is supposed to be a gift that's freely given, not an obligation you're trapped in. And real gifts should flow both ways, not just one direction. I thought about those words constantly over the next few days and weeks. I thought about all the things I had given my daughter over all these years. The down payment on her first car when she turned 21, which had been about $8,000. The money for her wedding, which had ended up costing nearly $15,000 when everything was added up. The loan I'd given her for the down payment on her house, a full $20,000 that I had pulled out of my retirement savings account. I had never asked for a single penny of it back. I had never even really thought of it as a loan that needed to be repaid. It was just what you did for your kids when you loved them. You helped them out. You gave them what they needed to build their lives. You made their lives easier and better because you wanted the best for them. But what had she actually given me lately? Not her time, that was clear as day. Not her honesty or respect. Not even the basic courtesy of telling me the truth instead of letting me pack my bags and drive all the way to that cruise terminal like a complete fool. I started going through everything and keeping careful track. Not in a mean or petty way, just in a factual way so I could see it all clearly. I went through years and years of old bank statements and checkbooks and email records. I wrote down every single time I had helped her out financially over the last 10 years. The car down payment, the wedding expenses, the house down payment, but also all the smaller things that added up over time. The times I had paid for her groceries when money was tight for her and her husband. The birthday checks I sent every year. The generous Christmas gifts. The emergency fund I had given her when her husband was between jobs for 3 months and they were struggling. The total amount came to just over $63,000. I sat there at my kitchen table, staring at that number written in my own handwriting at the bottom of the page, circled twice. $63,000. That was a huge amount of money. That was money my husband and I had saved up over decades of hard work. Money we had carefully put away for our retirement years, for emergencies, for the future we planned together. And I had given it away, piece by piece, year after year, because I thought that's what good mothers were supposed to do. Because I wanted my daughter to have an easier, better life than I'd had growing up. Because I loved her with my whole heart. My daughter finally called me 4 days after she had sailed away on that cruise ship. I was out in the garden, down on my knees, pulling weeds from around the tomato plants, when my cell phone started ringing in my pocket. The soil was warm and damp under my knees. I almost didn't answer the call, but something made me pull off my gardening gloves and pick up. Maybe it was just old habit. Maybe it was curiosity. "Mom?" Her voice sounded so bright and cheerful, like absolutely nothing had happened between us. "How are you doing?" I straightened up slowly, my knees creaking a bit. I brushed the dirt off my pants. "I'm fine." "Oh, good. That's good. Listen, I'm calling you from the ship right now. We're in the Bahamas and it is absolutely gorgeous here. Mom, the water is so incredibly blue, like nothing I've ever seen before. I really wish you could see it." I didn't say anything at all. I just stood there in my garden, phone pressed against my ear, listening to her talk about the things she had deliberately and carefully excluded me from. "Mom, are you still there? Can you hear me okay?" "I'm here. I can hear you just fine." "Okay, good. The connection can be weird sometimes on these ships. Anyway, I just wanted to check in with you real quick. Make sure you're doing okay. I know the whole situation at the terminal was kind of awkward and uncomfortable, but I really truly do think this is for the best. For both of us. You'll see what I mean eventually. When I get back home, we'll talk about everything properly." "I got your letter," I said quietly. "Oh, good. I'm so glad. So you understand then? You get why I did it this way. I understand that you lied to me for months and months. I understand that you let me pack all my bags and drive all the way to the port and stand there like a complete fool, while you just walked away from me like I was nothing to you." There was a pause on her end. I could hear music playing in the background somewhere, people laughing and having fun. "Mom, please don't be so dramatic about this." I explained everything in the letter. This is about establishing healthy boundaries. This is about me taking care of my own mental health and well-being. You can't expect me to be responsible for your happiness all the time. That's not fair to me. And what about my mental health? I asked, what about my well-being? Another pause, even longer this time. "Look, I really have to go right now. We have a snorkeling excursion that starts in 20 minutes and I need to get ready. I'll call you again when I get back home and we can talk about all of this like rational adults, okay?" She hung up before I could say another word. I stood there in my garden, phone still in my hand, dirt still under my fingernails, and I felt something shift deep inside me. It wasn't anger, not exactly. It was more like a sudden clarity, like a fog lifting. Like I had been looking at one of those optical illusion pictures, the kind where you can see two completely different images depending on how you focus your eyes, and suddenly I could only see one version now. The version where I had spent years and years giving and giving everything I had. And my daughter had spent those same years taking and taking and taking. And somewhere along the way we had both just started thinking that was completely normal and acceptable. I went back inside my house and called Margaret Chen's office. I told her secretary that I was ready to make some serious changes to my legal documents. Over the next 2 weeks, while my daughter was sailing around the Caribbean without a care in the world, I got all my affairs in proper order. I met with Margaret multiple times. I updated my will completely. I set up a trust with very specific conditions attached to it. I made absolutely sure that my house, my savings, everything I had worked so hard for over my entire life would be properly protected no matter what happened to me. I didn't cut my daughter out of everything completely. I'm not a cruel or vindictive person, but I made very sure that she wouldn't just automatically get access to everything simply by default, simply because she happened to be my only child. I made sure there were conditions she'd have to meet, protections in place, a clear recognition that inheritance isn't just automatically given just because someone happens to share your DNA. I also started seeing a therapist around that same time. Her name was Dr. Linda Kowalski, and she had an office that always smelled like lavender. She had such a kind, grandmotherly sort of face that immediately put me at ease. Over several sessions, I told her everything about my situation, about my husband dying and how devastatingly lonely I had been afterward, about how maybe I had clung way too tight to my daughter because I was so afraid of being completely alone in this world. Dr. Kowalski didn't judge me at all. She just listened so carefully and asked thoughtful questions and helped me start to see patterns in my behavior that I honestly hadn't noticed before. "It's very possible," she said to me during our 3rd session together, "that you and your daughter have been enabling each other in unhealthy ways for quite some time now. You've been depending on her for your sense of connection and purpose in life. She's been depending on you for financial support and convenience whenever she needs something. Neither one of those dynamics is healthy when you really look at it. So what am I supposed to do about it?" I asked her. "You start building a life for yourself that doesn't revolve entirely around her and her needs. You find other sources of meaningful connection with people. You find other ways to spend your time and energy. You let her experience the natural consequences of her own choices, and you stop constantly rescuing her and protecting her from those consequences." It sounded so simple and straightforward when she explained it like that. In actual practice, though, it turned out to be much harder than I expected. I had to actively fight against the urge to call my daughter every single time something happened in my day. I had to learn to sit with the uncomfortable feeling of not knowing exactly what she was doing, how she was feeling, whether she was okay or not. But slowly, day by day, week by week, I started to fill up my time with other things that had nothing to do with her. I joined a book club that met at the public library. It was every Tuesday evening, and there were 7 of us total, all women around my age. We met in a small room that always smelled like fresh coffee and old paper and dust. We read everything you can imagine: mystery novels, memoirs, literary fiction about complicated families falling apart and sometimes coming back together. I absolutely loved having the chance to talk about stories and characters and ideas, instead of just constantly talking about my own problems and situation. It felt so freeing. I also started volunteering 3 days every week at the community center, helping out with their lunch program for senior citizens. The work itself was pretty simple and straightforward: helping prepare the meals in the kitchen, serving the food, cleaning up all the dishes and tables afterward. But I genuinely liked it. I liked the other volunteers, the easy and comfortable conversations we would have while we were chopping up vegetables or washing dishes together in the big industrial sink. I liked feeling useful and needed in a way that had absolutely nothing to do with my daughter or her problems. I reconnected with several old friends I had unfortunately lost touch with over the past several years. Women I had known from church, from the PTA back when Sarah was young and in school, from the neighborhood. I had let all those good friendships just fade away after my husband died. Too wrapped up in my own grief at first, and then too wrapped up in my daughter's life and needs. But when I reached out to these women again, they were so kind and welcoming. They invited me to lunch dates, to go see movies together, to come to their homes for dinner. And I said yes. I made myself say yes to things and actually show up. I started building an actual social life that belonged to me. I even took a watercolor painting class on Thursday evenings at the art center downtown. I wasn't very good at painting at all, but I really liked the way it felt to focus completely on something that had nothing whatsoever to do with anyone else in my life. Just me and the paper and the brushes and the colors slowly bleeding into each other and mixing in unexpected ways. The teacher was a patient, gentle woman named Rose who never criticized anyone's work, just offered quiet suggestions here and there. "Try using a bit more water," she would say softly. "Let the colors mix together on their own. Don't try to control every little thing." My daughter finally came back home from her cruise on a Saturday. She called me that same evening, right around dinner time. "We're back home now," she announced cheerfully. "The trip was absolutely amazing, Mom. Better than I even imagined. I feel so refreshed and recharged." "I'm glad to hear you had a good time. So listen, I was thinking we should definitely meet up for lunch sometime this week. Maybe Tuesday would work? There's that cute little cafe you like so much downtown. We can sit down together and talk through everything, get on the exact same page about boundaries and expectations and all that stuff going forward." "I'm busy on Tuesday," I told her calmly. "I have my book club that evening and I have things I need to do that day to prepare." "Oh, okay then. How about Wednesday instead? Wednesday I volunteer at the community center. How about Thursday afternoon? I'm free after 3 o'clock. There was a pause on her end of the line. I could almost hear the wheels turning in her head, trying to figure out why I wasn't immediately and automatically rearranging my entire schedule just to accommodate her like I always had before. "Thursday works, I guess," she said finally, sounding a bit uncertain. "I'll pick you up at your house at 3. Actually, I'll just meet you there at the restaurant. I have my watercolor painting class at 6, so I need to have my own car with me." Another pause, longer this time. "Okay, sure, that's fine. I'll text you the address of the place." We ended up meeting at a small Italian restaurant near the river. She was already sitting at a table by the window when I arrived, right on time. She stood up when she saw me walking in, gave me a hug. It felt stiff and awkward and performative. We both felt it, that awkwardness hanging in the air between us. She was wearing a new sundress, something she must have bought while she was on the cruise. It was pale blue with tiny white flowers printed all over it, and it was actually quite pretty on her. We ordered our food from the waitress. My daughter talked almost nonstop about the cruise for a while, about all the delicious food they'd had, about the shows and entertainment every night, about all the different ports they had visited and what they'd done at each one. She showed me probably 50 pictures on her phone. Beautiful beaches with impossibly white sand. Her and her husband all dressed up fancy for the formal dinner nights, both of them smiling big for the camera. A gorgeous sunset view from their private balcony. I nodded at all the appropriate times and made all the appropriate comments, When our food finally arrived, she set her phone down on the table. "So," she said, looking directly at me now, "I really want to talk about this whole boundaries thing properly. Okay, I think we really need to establish some clear, specific guidelines that we both agree to follow. Like, for example, maybe we should plan to talk on the phone just once a week on a set day, instead of you calling me every single day like you've been doing. And if you need help with something around the house or with technology or whatever, you should try calling someone else first before you call me. Like maybe a handyman or a neighbor or someone from your church. I just can't be your automatic first call for absolutely everything anymore. It's not healthy for either one of us." I took a slow sip of my water. The ice clinked against the glass. "That sounds fair to me." She actually blinked in surprise, like she had been fully expecting me to argue with her or get upset. "Really? You think so?" "Really. I've actually been thinking along those same lines myself. I have been way too dependent on you, and you're absolutely right that it's not healthy. I've been actively working on changing that." "Oh, well that's actually really good, Mom. I'm glad you're taking this seriously and being mature about it." "I am taking it very seriously. Extremely seriously, in fact." "Good. So we're on the same page then about all this." "Not quite completely," I said carefully. "There's something else we need to talk about too." She picked up her fork, speared a piece of lettuce from her salad. "What's that?" "I've also been making some other significant changes in my life lately. Legal things. Financial things. I met with a lawyer a few weeks ago." Her whole expression shifted noticeably, just slightly. The fork stopped halfway to her mouth. "What kind of legal things are you talking about?" "I updated my will completely. I set up a trust with specific conditions. I made sure everything is properly in order in case something happens to me." "Mom, you're not dying or anything." "No, I'm not. But I'm 73 years old now. I'm not getting any younger, and I want to make absolutely sure my wishes are crystal clear." She set her fork back down on her plate with a soft clink. "So what exactly does that mean? For me specifically? It means that when I do eventually pass away, everything will be handled according to my specific wishes and instructions, not just automatically by default. There are conditions attached now, protections put in place. That honestly sounds like you're trying to punish me for something." "I'm not trying to punish anyone at all. I'm protecting myself and my assets. I'm making sure that everything your father and I worked so incredibly hard for goes exactly where it should go. To someone who genuinely values it and values me as a person." She stared at me hard. Her face had gone noticeably pale. "Because of this stupid cruise? You're seriously going to hold that over my head forever? You're actually going to cut me out of your will because I took one vacation without you?" "This isn't just about the cruise itself," I said calmly and evenly. "This is about me finally realizing that I need to take proper care of myself, the exact same way you need to take care of yourself. You were absolutely right when you said we needed boundaries. We both need them. But boundaries have to go both directions. Sarah, you can't expect me to be there and available whenever you happen to need something, and then just shut me out and push me away when it becomes inconvenient for you. I never shut you out. You left me standing at a cruise terminal alone, after months and months of deliberately lying to me about it, after letting me fully believe I was going on this wonderful trip with you. If that doesn't count as shutting someone out, then I honestly don't know what does." She opened her mouth to say something, then closed it again. For just a brief moment, She looked like she might actually start crying. Then her face hardened up. "So that's it then? You're just going to cut me off completely?" "I'm not cutting you off from anything. I'm establishing my own boundaries in my own life, exactly the same way you did. You wanted space from me. I'm giving you that space. You wanted me to be less dependent on you. I'm actively becoming less dependent. But that also means you're going to be less dependent on me too. On my money. On my house. On the inheritance you were just assuming would automatically be yours someday." She suddenly stood up from the table. Her chair made a harsh scraping sound against the floor that made several other diners look over at us. "I seriously can't believe this. I can't believe you're being so incredibly petty about everything. Sit back down, Sarah." "No, I'm leaving right now. You can call me whenever you're finally ready to act like a reasonable adult about all this." She grabbed her purse off the back of her chair and walked out of the restaurant. Just left me sitting there alone at the table. I sat there quietly for another few minutes, then calmly finished my soup even though it had gone lukewarm. I paid the full bill for both of our meals, and then I drove directly to my watercolor painting class and spent 2 peaceful hours painting a mountain landscape with a calm blue lake, and I didn't think about my daughter even one single time. Over the next several months, my relationship with my daughter changed dramatically. We talked much less frequently. We saw each other much less often. At first, I'm not going to lie, it hurt quite a bit. I would catch myself reaching for the phone automatically, wanting to call her and tell her about something small and ordinary that had happened in my day. And then I would remember that I was supposed to be actively building a life that didn't revolve entirely around her and her needs and her schedule. So instead I would call one of my friends from book club. Or I would write about it in the journal that Dr. Kowalski had suggested I start keeping. But slowly, gradually, over time, that hurt started to fade away. And what replaced it was something much quieter, something much steadier and more solid. I started to genuinely feel like myself again, like a complete whole person. Not just somebody's mother, not just somebody's wife, just me. I started tutoring students at the public library, kids who needed extra help with their reading comprehension and their math homework. It was all volunteer work, just a few hours a week, but it filled something deep inside me that had been empty and aching for such a long time. I was actually good at this. The kids seemed to really like me and looked forward to our sessions. Their parents would thank me sincerely and tell me what a difference I was making. I felt genuinely useful, but in a healthy way. I felt needed without feeling used. In early December, Sarah reached out to me. She wanted to know what I was planning to do for Christmas. I told her honestly that I was going to be spending the holiday with my friends from the community center. We were organizing a big potluck dinner together, and then we were all going to see a holiday show at the local theater. She sounded genuinely surprised when I told her, and maybe even a little bit hurt, but she didn't push the issue or try to make me feel guilty about it. She just said that she and her husband were going to his parents' house anyway, so it worked out fine. On Christmas Eve, a package arrived at my front door. It was from Sarah. Inside the box was a framed photograph of the two of us together from her wedding day, along with a card. The card said in her handwriting, "I'm sorry for the way I handled everything. I miss you so much. I miss us. Love, Sarah." I carefully placed that framed photo on my fireplace mantel, right next to the one of my husband. But I didn't call her right away like I might have done before. I wanted to really sit with it for a while, to think deeply and carefully about what kind of relationship I actually wanted to have with her moving forward into the future. Not the unhealthy relationship we'd had before, where I constantly gave and she constantly took without much thought. Not a relationship where either one of us felt resentful or used or taken for granted. Something genuinely different from all that. Something actually healthier and more balanced for both of us. I finally called her a few days after New Year's. We talked for quite a while, being very careful and polite with each other. She asked me how my Christmas had been. I asked her about hers. She told me all about her husband's family, about the gifts they had all exchanged, about the beautiful snow they'd gotten on Christmas morning that made everything look like a postcard. Then, toward the very end of our conversation, she said something that surprised me. "I've been doing a lot of thinking lately about what you said to me, about boundaries and everything. And I think maybe I went about the whole thing completely the wrong way." "Okay," I said, not sure where she was going with this. "The cruise thing was genuinely cruel. I can see that now. I should have just been completely honest with you from the very start instead of letting you think you were coming along with us. That was wrong. I was wrong to do that to you." "Yes," I agreed quietly. "You were wrong. I'm truly sorry. I really genuinely am. I thought at the time that I was protecting myself and setting boundaries, but really I was just being a coward about the whole thing. And I hurt you badly. I know that, and I'm sorry." I believed her apology. Not because it was perfect or perfectly worded, but because I could hear something genuine and raw in her voice that hadn't been there before. "Thank you for saying that," I told her. "So where do we go from here?" she asked. "How do we fix this?" "I honestly don't know for sure," I admitted. "But I think we need to take it slow and careful. We need to figure out together what actually works for both of us. And we need to be completely honest with each other, even when it's really hard and uncomfortable. Especially when it's hard." "I can do that," she said. "I want to do that. Me too." We started seeing each other again after that conversation, but in a completely different way than before. Once a month, we would meet somewhere for lunch. We would talk about our separate lives, but not in that tangled, enmeshed, codependent way we used to. She would tell me about her work, about her friends, about interesting books she was reading. I would tell her about my tutoring at the library, about my watercolor painting class and how much I was improving, about the trip I was planning with some friends from book club. We were slowly learning how to exist in each other's lives without completely consuming each other or losing ourselves in the process. If you're finding meaning in this story, I'd really love it if you'd subscribe to the channel. It truly helps more people find these stories. Thank you so much for being here and listening. In March, something completely unexpected happened. My daughter called me on a Tuesday evening, which was outside of our normal once-a-month pattern. "Mom," she said, and her voice sounded different somehow. "I really need to talk to you about something important." My very first instinct was worry. "What's wrong? Is everything okay?" "Nothing's wrong at all. It's actually, I've just been thinking a lot lately about money and about all the financial help you've given me over all these years. And I realized something. I never paid you back for any of it. Not one penny." I sat down heavily in my kitchen chair. It creaked under me. "Sarah, you don't have to." "No, Mom, I really do. I want to." I've spent the last few weeks going through all my old records and bank statements, and I figured out that you've given me somewhere around $63,000 over the last decade or so. Maybe even more than that. The car down payment, the wedding expenses, the house down payment, all those smaller things in between that added up. And I just took all of it without even really thinking about what that meant for you. What it cost you. What you and Dad had saved up for your own retirement that you gave to me instead. I honestly didn't know what to say. I just sat there at my kitchen table with the phone pressed against my ear, staring at the refrigerator, at all the little magnets my daughter had given me over the years from various trips and occasions. So I want to start paying you back, she continued. I know I can't do it all at once, that would be impossible. But I can set up a regular monthly payment to you. Maybe $500 a month to start? It's going to take quite a while to pay it all back, but I really want to do this. I want to try to make this right. Something warm and tight filled up my chest, spreading through me. Sarah, you really don't have to do that. I know I don't have to. But I want to. I really truly want to. Please let me do this. I thought about it for a long moment. I thought about pride and forgiveness and what it really means to let someone try to make amends for their mistakes. I thought about my daughter as a little girl, learning how to tie her shoes, learning how to ride a bike, learning that actions have real consequences and sometimes you have to work hard to fix what you've broken. Okay, I said finally. If that's truly what you want to do. It is. It really is. 2 weeks later, the first payment showed up in my bank account. $500 with a note attached that said simply, "Love you, Mom." I stared at that transaction on my computer screen for the longest time. It really wasn't about the money itself, not really. It was about the fact that she was genuinely trying now. That she was seeing me differently than she had before. Not just as an endless resource to be used up, but as a real person who had made real sacrifices for her over and over. A person who deserved to be treated with respect and consideration. Things still weren't perfect between us. They probably never would be completely perfect. But they were so much better than they had been. More honest. More balanced. More real. We were building something new together, something that felt sturdier and more solid than what we'd had before, even if it looked completely different. In June, I did something I had been thinking about and planning for months. I booked myself a cruise. Not the same exact one that Sarah had taken without me, but a different one entirely. A smaller ship that went up the coast to Alaska instead. 7 full days of glaciers and whales and charming little coastal towns that clung to the edges of mountains. I invited 2 of my good friends from book club to come along with me. They both said yes immediately, excited about the adventure. I didn't tell Sarah about it until exactly 1 week before I was scheduled to leave. We were having our regular monthly lunch together at that same restaurant by the river. I'm going on a cruise next week, I mentioned casually, like it was no big deal at all. Up to Alaska. She looked genuinely surprised. Her fork stopped halfway to her mouth and she just stared at me. You're going on a cruise? I am. That's wonderful, Mom. That's really, really great. She set down her fork carefully and smiled at me, and it looked genuine. Are you nervous about it at all? Maybe a little bit, but mostly I'm just really excited. You should be excited. You absolutely deserve this. You really do. I smiled back at her. Thank you, sweetheart. That means a lot. The day I left for my cruise, I packed my suitcase in exactly the same slow, careful way I had done before. But this time, everything felt completely different. I wasn't thinking about being left behind or excluded. I wasn't thinking about anyone except myself. I folded my clothes neatly, chose my most comfortable shoes, tucked my favorite book into my carry-on bag. I double-checked that I had my passport, all my medications, my camera, my sunglasses. When I locked my front door behind me and headed to the airport, I felt nothing except pure anticipation and excitement. The cruise turned out to be absolutely beautiful, even more than I had imagined. We saw whales breaching in the distance, their massive bodies rising up out of the impossibly blue water. We saw glaciers that were thousands of years old, blue and white and ancient. We visited tiny little towns that seemed to cling to the edges of steep mountains, full of friendly people and interesting shops. The water was so blue it almost didn't look real. The air was cold and clean and smelled like pine trees and salt water. I drank my coffee out on the deck early in the mornings, wrapped up in a warm blanket, watching the sun slowly come up over the water and paint everything gold. I laughed with my friends over long dinners. We tried all the fancy restaurants and the casual buffets. We even danced, pretty badly, at the cheesy theme parties they had every night. We stayed up way too late playing cards in the lounge and telling each other stories. I felt free in a way I honestly hadn't felt in years and years. Free from constant worry, from obligation, from that low-level anxiety of always wondering if my daughter needed something from me, if I was doing enough, if I was being a good enough mother. For those 7 days, I was just me. Just a woman on a boat, watching whales swim by, eating too much dessert, taking way too many pictures of everything. On the very last night of the cruise, I stood out on the deck all by myself, looking out at the dark water stretching out forever. The ship was quiet because most people had already gone to bed. I thought about my husband, about how much he would have absolutely loved this trip. He had always wanted to see Alaska. We had talked about it so many times, made all kinds of vague plans, but we had never quite made it happen. There was always something else, some other priority that seemed more important at the time. And then suddenly he was gone, and it was too late. I thought about my daughter, about the long and strange and difficult road we had traveled together to get to where we are right now. About that cruise that never was, the one that had hurt me so deeply, but had also woken me up and forced me to change. About the woman I had been just 1 year ago, standing in that busy cruise terminal, confused and hurt and feeling so small and invisible. I wasn't that woman anymore. I had built something new and strong. A life that actually belonged to me. Friends who genuinely valued me and enjoyed my company. Activities and hobbies that fulfilled me and challenged me. A real sense of self that didn't depend on anyone else to exist. When I got back home to my regular life, Sarah picked me up from the airport. It was a complete surprise because I hadn't asked her to. She was waiting right there at baggage claim with a small bouquet of yellow daisies, which have always been my absolute favorite flowers. "Welcome home, Mom," she said with a genuine smile. I hugged her tight, and this time it felt real and warm and uncomplicated. On the drive back to my house, she asked me all about the trip. I told her absolutely everything, and she really listened. She asked good questions and laughed at all the right parts of my stories. She told me that she had been checking on my house while I was gone, watering all my plants and bringing in the mail so it wouldn't pile up. I thanked her sincerely for thinking of that. When we finally pulled into my driveway, she helped me carry my suitcase inside. There were fresh flowers sitting in a vase on my kitchen table. She must have put them there that morning before coming to get me. "Thank you so much for picking me up," I told her. "Of course, Mom." She hesitated there by the door, like she wasn't quite sure if she should stay longer or go. "Can I ask you something?" Sure, honey. Are we okay? You and me? Are we really okay now? I looked at her, really truly looked at her. She wasn't a little girl anymore, the one who had needed me for absolutely everything. She wasn't even the woman who had walked away from me at that cruise terminal. She was someone in between all of that. Someone who was trying hard. Someone who was learning and growing. Just like me. Yeah, I said with certainty. We're okay. We really are. She smiled, and I could see genuine relief wash over her whole face. Good, I'm so glad. After she left, I unpacked my suitcase slowly and carefully. I hung up all my clothes in the closet. I put my shoes back on the rack. I tucked my passport back in its proper drawer where I always kept it. But this time, I didn't feel sad at all that the trip was over. Instead, I felt deeply grateful that I had gone. And I felt absolutely certain that there would be more trips in my future. More mornings spent watching the sun come up over unfamiliar water. More chances to be just me, not someone's wife or someone's mother, just me. I made myself a cup of tea and sat down at my kitchen table in my creaky chair. The house was quiet all around me, but it wasn't a lonely kind of quiet anymore. It was peaceful. The kind of quiet that feels like genuine rest instead of emptiness. I thought about that day at the cruise terminal one more time. About standing there with my packed suitcase, watching my daughter walk away from me without looking back. At the time, it had felt like absolutely the worst thing that could possibly happen to me. Like a rejection so complete and total that I didn't know how I would ever recover from it. Like proof that I had somehow failed, that I wasn't enough, that my love wasn't enough. But now, looking back on it from where I am today, I could see it so differently. That awful moment hadn't destroyed me at all. It had woken me up from a long sleep. It had forced me to ask myself hard questions I had been avoiding for years. Who was I without my daughter? What did I actually want from my own life? What did I truly deserve from the people around me? What did real, healthy love actually look like? The answers to those questions hadn't come easily at all. I had had to do the hard work. I had had to sit with terrible discomfort. I had had to build something entirely new from the ground up. I had had to let go of the old version of myself that needed to be needed, that found all her worth and value in taking care of someone else. I had had to learn how to be whole and complete all on my own. And my daughter, in her own messy and imperfect way, had found herself too during this time. We had both desperately needed space to grow into better versions of ourselves. We had both needed to learn how to be whole, complete people on our own before we could possibly be healthy together in relationship. I'm not going to lie and say that everything is perfect between us now. Some days are still genuinely hard and difficult. Some days I miss the old closeness we used to have, even though I know now that it wasn't real closeness at all, just unhealthy dependence dressed up to look like love. Some days I still wonder if I'm doing the right thing, if I'm being too hard on her, if I should just forgive everything and go back to the way things used to be. But most days I feel steady and clear and strong. I feel like I'm finally living a life that's actually and truly mine. I still see Sarah once every month for lunch. We still talk on the phone sometimes, though much less frequently than we used to. And that's perfectly okay with both of us. She's actively building her own life. I'm actively building mine. We love each other deeply, but we don't need each other in that desperate, all-consuming way anymore. We're slowly learning how to love each other with open hands instead of clenched fists that won't let go. Last week, she called to tell me some exciting news. She's pregnant. I'm going to be a grandmother. When she told me, the news filled me up with so much joy, but also with a quiet kind of caution. I want to be there for her during this time. I want to be part of this baby's life. But I also want to make absolutely sure I don't fall back into those same old unhealthy patterns we worked so hard to break. I don't want to lose myself all over again. I want to be part of this baby's life, I told her honestly. But I also want to make sure we have very clear expectations from the start. About boundaries, about what I can realistically offer, about what works well for everyone involved. There was a pause on the phone. I held my breath, half expecting her to get defensive or upset with me. But instead, she said something that made my heart feel full. I think that's really wise, Mom. I want that too. I don't want us to repeat the same unhealthy patterns we fell into before. I want to do this right this time. We talked for a while longer after that, making preliminary plans, imagining the future together. We talked honestly and openly, without all that resentment and obligation that used to color absolutely everything between us. When we finally hung up, I felt genuinely hopeful. Not naive or unrealistic, but truly hopeful. We had both learned some incredibly hard lessons. Maybe, just maybe, we could actually do better this time around. I'm still taking my watercolor painting class every Thursday evening. I'm actually getting noticeably better at it, slowly but surely. Just last week, I painted a seascape that actually looked like the ocean, with realistic waves and light reflecting off the water and everything. Rose, my patient teacher, said it was absolutely my best work yet. I felt proud of myself in a way I honestly hadn't felt in years and years. I'm still volunteering regularly at the community center. Still going to my book club every Tuesday evening without fail. Still tutoring kids at the library and watching them improve and grow. I'm currently planning another trip with my friends from book club. This time we're going to see the Grand Canyon in the fall when the weather will be cooler and more pleasant. I've never been there before in my entire life, and I'm excited in that pure, uncomplicated way you feel when you're doing something just for yourself and nobody else. My life isn't sitting on hold, waiting around for my daughter to need me, or waiting for the next family crisis to happen. My life is happening right now, today. It's full and rich and genuinely mine. I have real friends who call me up just to chat, who invite me to do things, who value my company and my friendship. I have activities and hobbies that fulfill me, that challenge me, that make me feel useful and capable. I have a future that I'm actively excited about, that I'm building with my own hands instead of just passively waiting for. Sometimes I still think about that woman standing at the cruise terminal, the one with the packed suitcase and the confusion and the deep hurt. I think about how lost she felt in that moment, how small and invisible and unimportant. And I want so badly to go back and tell her that it's going to get better, that the thing that feels like a terrible ending is actually a new beginning, that she's so much stronger than she knows right now. But I don't actually need to tell her any of that, because she already figured it all out on her own. She's me, and I'm her, and we made it through to the other side together. The cruise I never got to take ended up teaching me so much more than any actual trip ever could have. It taught me that people will treat you exactly the way you allow them to treat you. It taught me that love without genuine respect isn't really love at all, not the kind that matters. It taught me that it's never ever too late to stand up for yourself, to change old patterns, to build a better and healthier life for yourself. I'm 73 years old now. I've been a wife, a mother, a widow, A woman who lost herself completely and then somehow found herself again. I've made plenty of mistakes along the way. I've been hurt deeply. I've probably hurt other people too, more than I fully realize. But I'm still here, still learning new things, still growing and changing. I'm going on another cruise next spring. The Mediterranean this time. Greece and Italy and all those places I've only ever read about in books and seen in pictures. I've already booked it and paid for it in full. I've already started making detailed packing lists. My friends from book club are coming with me again. We're going to see ancient ruins that are thousands of years old. We're going to see that incredibly blue water everyone talks about. We're going to visit cities that have been standing for longer than our country has even existed. And when I stand at that check-in counter next time, when they ask for my name to find my reservation, it's going to be right there. Right there on the list, exactly where it belongs and exactly where I put it myself. Because I'm not waiting around for anyone else to include me in my own life anymore. I'm not waiting for permission or approval or for someone else to decide that I'm worth bringing along. I'm doing it myself now. I'm choosing myself every single day. That's the thing I've learned about being left behind. Eventually, if you let it, you realize that you can walk forward on your own 2 feet. You don't need someone else to take you along. And sometimes, that's exactly what you needed to learn all along. Sometimes the people who leave you standing there are actually doing you a favor, even though they don't mean to and even though it hurts terribly at the time. They're showing you that you don't need them nearly as much as you thought you did. They're giving you the unexpected gift of finding out who you really are without them. So if you're out there listening to this and you've ever felt invisible in your own life, ever felt taken for granted by people who should love you better, ever stood somewhere waiting for someone who never actually intended to bring you along, I want you to know something important. You're not stuck in that moment forever. That moment doesn't get to define who you are. What defines you is what you choose to do next. You can choose to stay small and hurt and waiting for things to change on their own. Or you can pick up your suitcase, walk back to your car with your head held high, and start building something new and better for yourself. I chose the second option, and it has made all the difference in my life. Thank you so much for listening to my story today. If it meant something to you, if it touched your heart in any way, I would be so grateful if you would take just a moment to hit that like button and subscribe to this channel. It truly does help more people find these stories, and honestly, it means the whole world to me to know that someone out there is listening and connecting with these experiences. Please drop a comment below and let me know where you're watching from, or if you've ever experienced something similar in your own life. I read every single comment that comes in, and your stories, your experiences, they matter so much to me. They remind me that none of us are truly alone in what we go through. If you would like to support this channel, there's a link down below in the description, but please, absolutely no pressure at all. Just having you here, taking the time to listen to an old woman's story, that's more than enough for me. Take good care of yourself, and please remember, you are worth so much more than how other people choose to treat you. You deserve respect and honesty and love that doesn't require you to make yourself small and invisible. I'll see you in the next story.